Shavua Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Ketubot. We are up to Perek Yud Aleph, Mishnah Vav. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev Eliyahu ben Burcha Yisrael, ben Chana bat Miriam, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdi ben Chaim Nechaim, v'derefua Shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, betoch Shah Chorei Israel. The Mishnah begins by discussing certain women who do not receive any ketubah at all. The Mishnah begins, a girl who refuses, meaning an orphan girl who was married off as a child by her mother or brother, and then ends her marriage, which she can do simply by refusing to be married anymore and leaving her husband. Now, under Torah law, a girl under the age of 12 can be married off only by her father, meaning in order for the erusin to be effective, the groom must give the object of monetary value or the marriage document to the father, who is the one deciding on his daughter's behalf to agree to this marriage. The rabbis, however, decreed that if she has no father, her mother or adult brothers can marry her off. However, since her marriage in this case is not binding under Torah law, she can leave her husband before she turns 12 by refusing him, what's called performing miyun, even without receiving a get, as we discussed in Masechet Yevamot, chapter 13, Mishnah 1 through 3. So, Hamimanet, a girl who refuses. Hashniya, a secondary erva, meaning a woman married to a relative who was biblically permitted to her but rabbinically forbidden. For example, a grandmother married to her grandson. The marriage, though forbidden, is binding since it was permitted under biblical law. We spoke about this in Yevamot, chapter 2, Mishnah 4, and chapter 9, Mishnah 3. Va'ilonit, and an ilonit, meaning a woman who has certain physical characteristics that show that she can never have children, a fact her husband found out only after he married her. And lem ketubah, in each of these cases, if she is widow or divorced, she receives payment neither for her ketubah, meaning she does not receive the basic payment of 100 or 200 zuz. However, the reason is different in each case. The girl who refuses loses her ketubah because she chose to leave her husband. The secondary erva is penalized with the loss of her ketubah because given that women are usually more interested in marriage than men are, we assume that she encouraged her husband to marry her despite the prohibition, and discovering one's wife is an ilunate makes the whole marriage a mistake. For had the husband known of her condition, he would have not married her in the first place, therefore their marriage is null and void, as though it never happened. So in each of these cases, if she is widowed or divorced, she does not receive payment for her ketubah, velo perod, nor for the produce of the mulog property that her husband ate during their marriage. If her husband used her property and benefited from its produce, as a husband is entitled to do so, he does not need to compensate her for what he took. And here too, the reason is different in each case. By the girl who refuses, before she left her husband, they were considered married, and he had the same right to its produce as any other husband does, therefore he is not required to pay her for it. The marriage of the secondary erva was forbidden, and the husband was not entitled to take the produce, but nevertheless, in order to penalize her, like we said earlier, the rabbis decreed that she cannot claim compensation for produce he already ate, and the husband of the ilunate also had no right to take the produce since the marriage was not valid. However, because she let him eat it and never objected, she cannot demand compensation now. V'lo mizonot, nor for her support. In the case of the secondary erva and the ilunate, the husband was not obligated to support her, just as he is not obligated to pay the ketubah. In the case of the girl who refuses, however, he did have to support her when they were still married. The Gemara on page 107, Masechet Ketubot, therefore explains the Mishnah is referring to a specific case. The girl borrowed money while they were married to pay for her food. For example, he was out of the country and could not send her money, and then she left him. Normally, a husband must pay back such a loan on behalf of his wife, since he is obligated to support her. This girl's husband, however, does not have to pay off her loan, because after she refused and ended their marriage, it is as though they were not married in the first place, and he is not required to pay for her support. Velo pelaot, nor for the loss of value of her worn out mulog property. For example, if she brought garments into the marriage as mulog property and the husband used them until they wore out, he is not obligated to pay her for them when their marriage ends. A husband's right to use his wife's possessions is the same as his right to eat produce from her mulog property. Therefore, just as he does not need to pay her for the produce he ate, so too does not need to pay for her belongings that he wore out. However, whatever is left of the worn out garments is returned to her. The Mishnah states the law regarding an ilunate whose husband did know of her condition before he married her. But if from the beginning he married her knowing that she was an ilunate, their marriage was valid because there was no mistake. Therefore, yeshla ketubah, she does receive the ketubah payment as well as all the other rights that we mentioned earlier. Now, the following women are in forbidden marriages and yet do receive a ketubah payment. Almana lekohen gadol, a widow is married to a kohen gadol. Grusha v'chalutza lekohen gadol, a divorcee or a chalutza is married to an ordinary kohen. An ordinary kohen may not marry a divorcee or a chalutza, which is a woman who participated in chalitza. A kohen gadol is prohibited to marry a widow as well. Mamzeret unitina liYisrael. A mamzeret or a netina was married to a regular Jew. A mamzer or in feminine mamzeret is the child of a relationship punishable by karet, or a child whose parent is either a mamzer or mamzeret. The Torah forbids a mamzer to marry an ordinary Jew. A natin or feminine netina is a descendant of the Canaanic group that converted in Yeshua's time. We spoke about it earlier in chapter 1, Mishnah 8. Bat Yisrael natin or mamzer, and a regular Jewish woman who was married to a natin or a mamzer. Yesh and ketubot, they do receive the ketubah payment even though their marriage is forbidden. Unlike the secondary erva who is penalized with the loss of her ketubah, like we said earlier, these women are not penalized, and the reason for this difference is that the women in these forbidden marriages are disqualified from later marrying a Kohen. Their children from the marriage are likewise prohibited to Kohanim, and in some cases even to regular Jews, like we spoke about earlier in chapter 1, Mishnah 9. Since a woman would not want herself or her children to be restricted in this way, we assume that she did not persuade her husband to marry her, rather he persuaded her to marry him. Therefore she is not penalized with the loss of her ketubah. Instead the husband is penalized in that he must pay the ketubah. In the case of the secondary erva, however, neither she nor her child becomes disqualified. Therefore we assume that she encouraged a forbidden marriage for which she is penalized. That is Alabotai of chapter Yud Aleph Mishnah Vav. We continue now with chapter Yud Bet Mishnah Aleph. This Mishnah discusses a certain commitment that a husband might agree to accept upon himself. If one married a woman, who stipulated with him that he must provide for her daughter from a previous marriage with food for 5 years, he made his commitment binding by writing it in a document, or by performing a kinyan, a formal act of acquisition, or by declaring it before 2 appointed witnesses. He is obligated to provide her daughter with food for 5 years. If he divorced her and she married another man, and she also stipulated with the new husband that he must provide her daughter with food for 5 years. The first husband is still obligated to provide her with food for the remainder of his 5 years. Although the second husband is also required to provide food to the first husband must also still fulfill his commitment, since he did not say that his commitment will last only as long as they are married or until she remarries. He must continue for the entire 5 years. Now the Mishnah cites 2 arguments that the first or second husband could make to remove or reduce the obligation, and it dismisses both arguments. Lo yomar rishon, the first husband cannot say regarding his ex-wife, if she would be coming to me, meaning if she were married to me, I would provide her daughter with food, but since we are divorced, I will not. Rather, his obligation remains in effect, and if the daughter is living with her mother, he must bring her food to her place. He must bring her food to her in the place where her mother lives. The Mishnah assumes that the girl is living with her mother because her daughter lives with the mother. A daughter is different than a son who remains with his mother only until the age of 6, after which he goes to live with his father. If the daughter does not live with her mother, he must bring food to her wherever she does live. The Mishnah just gave it as an example. Likewise, the 2 husbands cannot say, the 2 of us will provide her with food as one, meaning we will provide her with food and split the cost. Rather, one provides her with the food, and the other one gives her the value of the food in cash. Each of them on his own must supply the full amount, either in food or in money. The girl can choose which one provides food and which one provides money. She cannot, however, demand money from both of them. That is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Shavua Tov. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.